Hey guys, welcome back to another Game Time Discussions podcast. I'm Emery Cuzzy, sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about the power rankings for the upcoming NFL season. Going to go 32 down to 1 and give you everybody and kind of give you a quick overview of why we think that they're there. We're going to tell you if we thought they got better, worse, or if they just kind of stayed stagnant and didn't do anything enough to warrant going up in these rankings.
Right. So this is kind of our first edition. This isn't something we're going to do on a weekly basis, but more so like a monthly recap going forward. So hit it right now, and then we'll do it right as preseason starts, and then we'll do it right as the season starts
Right.
after October, December, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to start off with the New England Patriots at 32. What the fall that we've seen growing up, them being, top 5 for 20 years, and now they are our 32 team. It might be, why does they get below Washington and Carolina? Well, I think Carolina and Washington made significant strides in improving their roster, and New England had the most cap space going into the NFL offseason, and they just kind of used it to re-sign their guys.
Right.
So it's not like they got worse, but they just kind of made some lateral movements. Even their first overall pick, or their third overall pick, rather, Drake May, you don't expect him to play a ton, at least in the short term. So that's not making their team better this year. And I expect them to, be a formidable 5-win team. Their win total is tied for the lowest at 5.5. Not a number I would bet.
Right.
But,
of course.
It's just other teams improved and made a lot of moves and strides to do that, and you just kind of re-signed your guys. Christian Gonzalez and Matthew Judon coming back from injury will help, but I don't think it did enough to get out of the cellar of the AFC.
Yeah, and I think, only adding 3 players, of course, offensive guys, their new quarterback, running back, and, adding KJ Osborne, who's basically been a number 3 receiver all his career. I just don't think, they did enough to warrant moving up. But at the same time, I think that their future may be better because of the fact that, Drake May is there. If he does sit this year and then does improve and does well, that'll be good. And then also, they always have a good defense. So you can always lean on that at least. While other teams, which we'll jump over to some other teams, and ranking 31st on our list is Carolina Panthers. Well, they just lost some of their better defensive players in free agency. And so that actually hurts them. I mean, everybody on their departures list except for DJ Shark is a defensive player. What they did though is they added offense. So we appreciate that part because they needed to do that for Bryce Young.
Yeah, you're gonna see on young teams, it's a lot. I guess you're more capable of coming out with wins and sneaking out dubs when you're able to outscore opponents. So, like you said, lost a lot of defensive talent, but you make up for that with all the additions that you made. You spent over $150 million on 2 guards, which maybe that's not the best way to resource your money, but it was one of the worst lines, and they got 2 above average starters for sure. Jadeveon Clowney is a vet that just kind of seems to bounce around now, but he doesn't make your team worse. It is a downgrade from Brian Burns.
Right.
And then K'Lavon Chaisson, former first-round pick. Deontay Johnson is an additional piece. And then in the draft, 3 of their first 4 picks are skill players that they're just trying their best to. Bryce Young, we screwed up basically with the talent that we put around you year 1, and we kind of threw you in the fire. You had one of the worst seasons ever. But the reason to be optimistic, on top of the additions that they made, they have one of the easiest schedules. The entire NFC South in the top 5 in terms of strength of schedule. And so usually when that happens, teams kind of outperform what their actual talent level is. So again, they're tied for the lowest amount of win total, but it wouldn't shock me to see them as a 6-win team just because of the schedule that they're going to have. And I expect them to make strides offensively enough to where they'll be more competitive on Sundays.
Right. And they get to play the Saints, the Buccaneers, and the Falcons twice this year. So it tells you a little bit. I mean, they could split those for sure and then already have more wins than they had last year. So,
right.
And then jumping to 30, we got the New York Giants. Let's just say they got worse.
Yep.
Let's just be honest. It is what it is. I do love them going and getting speed at their 6th overall pick with Malik Neighbors, but I just don't know how you get better when you lose some of the bookend players that you've had for a long time on your team that have kind of been your support. Maybe they just stayed even, but it just feels like they got worse.
No, they did. They definitely did. And it's a huge, they did overachieve 2 seasons ago now when they were one of the Final Four and won a wild card playoff game. But your quarterback's coming off a torn ACL.
Mm-hmm.
There was already rumors all offseason about them drafting the quarterback anyway, even though they just signed to an extension. They brought in Drew Lock. There's just drama there. On top of that, you lose your best skill player, maybe even your second best skill player.
Mm-hmm.
Your line is bad. Your receiver core is probably the worst in the NFL after getting Malik Neighbors 6 overall. And then defensively, did a good job bringing over Brian Burns. You still have Leonard Williams there. But at the same time, it's just leaves much to be desired. There's just holes everywhere on this roster. And they would probably be my bet to have the first ability to take the first quarterback off the board.
Yeah, in the next year's draft, absolutely. And I think that the sixth ranked strength of schedule doesn't help in any way. So, but yeah, so then we got the Tennessee Titans. They are the 29th ranked team here, and we did not like their draft, so that hurts. And then they added a whole bunch of people to their team, but they also lost a bunch of guys that have been there for a while. So
it's weird. I feel like this is too low, but it's just really hard to project where they are because I think they're clearly cut as the 4th team in their division. And that's going to result in having a very likely being a losing record team. Strength of schedule is not the hardest or most difficult for them, and we'll break down the schedule as it comes out next week. But they actually improved the roster in terms of departures versus additions, in my opinion. But it's just, this is all about Will Levis.
Yeah.
If he makes strides and they flirt with 9 wins, I'm not going to be surprised. But if he doesn't, I won't be surprised if they have a top 5 pick.
Right.
It's that their outcomes are probably wider than any team at the bottom of the NFL to me.
And right now we're betting that Will Levis doesn't make those strides. Yeah, and I completely get it because we didn't actually have Will Levis that high on our boards when we came out. Just seeing the additions, I think that they, like you said, did better with additions. I think that there's some players in their draft class that were good football players, just not the needs. They missed out on some of the needs, and that's my biggest thing with this whole class, I guess. But yeah, so then we've got the Denver Broncos. They're in a situation. They got worse because of the fact that they had to deal with the Russell Wilson issue. And that's why they got worse. They will get better next year because they will be able to sign free agents.
Right.
They didn't get any big time free agents this year because they're sitting at $85 million in cap before they even start.
And again, it's another team that, we have them at 28. It feels too low based on where they are. I mean, despite all what they dealt with and struggled with and benching Russell Wilson, they still finished 8-9 last year. So they're a very good team. Very love Sean Payton as a coach. He's rigid and he's not for everybody. He's not everybody's cup of tea, but he can work with the right players around him. This year, I think they will take a step back. I think they are clearly the 4th best team in that division now. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're not going to pull off some upsets here and there. For sure. I mean, they have tied for the lowest win total at 5.5. So
I think
probably straddling right where I think they finish. And they're going to be on the cusp of a top 5 pick. I don't even think, despite being 28th, I don't think that they will have a top 5 pick. I think they'll be too good to have one of those, but we'll just kind of see where it goes from there. Moving on, Washington Commanders had the 2nd overall pick this year, Jaden Daniels, but they did more than anybody else in free agency. They had the 2nd most cap space, and they really, hit the head on a lot of needs. Defensively, they were awful last year, and then just bringing in 6-7 guys that just can contribute right away. Chase Young was a departure, but at the trade deadline, and so they did a lot of good things, and then their mid-round picks are a lot of guys that we like as well.
I think for us, like, this is a team that we would have higher if we knew what was going to happen.
Mhm.
This is probably one of the bigger question mark teams out of all of the teams that we have ranked, just because they added so many people. They added a bunch of starters in the draft, including a quarterback, and we just don't know what new owner or new coaching, new team, basically.
It's a complete overhaul.
It's like, how can we rank them high when we have no idea if they're all going to work together and things like that?
They have the lowest percentage of returning starters in the league.
Mhm.
They were competitive 4-13 last year. It's not like they just sucked. And
Right.
and I've said in a very early video when we started doing this podcast, they're a really strong bet to win the NFC East. That doesn't mean we're picking them, but they're right now like 8-1 to win the division. Hasn't been a repeat winner since 2004. Dallas will not win the division. And it just depends on, like you said, the coaching staff and how early they can mesh. But if I would not be shocked at all if this was a 2012, Redskins situation where when they were the Redskins, when Robert Griffin comes in and they're 8-8, 9-7, but they're winning the division, like that is in the realm of outcomes for this team.
Right, exactly. And then next up, we got the Arizona Cardinals, adding our favorite player in the draft in Marvin Harrison Jr., having the most draft capital of any team, and that gives them a lot of opportunity to get possible starters. And then not having that many departures really helped them. I think that this is a team that got better, but they were 4-13 last year, and Kyler Murray's back, so that's another thing.
That is the biggest gain for them this offseason, is that Kyler Murray is fully healthy.
Yeah.
We came in and I was under the impression that they might just sit him the whole year and just be a team like the Bears were, have the worst record, get the number 1 pick, trade a haul for somebody that was going to want Caleb Williams. Because if you think Bryce Young was going to get the capital that Chicago got for him, imagine what somebody would have paid for Caleb Williams if they landed with the first pick. And obviously they're not going to, well, they could have made a decision to take Caleb Williams, but say they didn't, it would have just been a massive, massive historical package to trade up for him. And then they still could have landed somebody like Marvin Harrison. So they had the most picks in the draft, hit a lot of needs, weren't in love with, all the selections, but depth-wise, they're much stronger this year. And, based on having one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the division, usually you don't see having one of the top 2 quarterbacks in your division and then just clear cut, you're going to finish last.
Right. Exactly.
So I expect them to leap to maybe a 3rd or 2nd place team this year. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
And then we got the New Orleans Saints. They took a step back.
Yes.
And so they had one of the worst cap situations coming into this year. They had to figure out what to do. They only added 2 players on their team, and they lost a good amount of players that were pretty important to their team. So I definitely see this being a down situation. They do get a steal at 41 with Kool-Aid McKinstry, but that's kind of the only bright spot I see on this whole thing here. So
yeah, it feels like this is the last year truly of their vets, like the Marshawn Lattimore, Demario Davis. Obviously, Tyrann Mathieu is back. Cam Jordan is getting up there in age. And then Ryan Ramczyk will miss a good portion, if not all, this season as their best offensive lineman. That is why they invest in Talise Fuaga. And then their quarterback situation, again, Derek Carr. They signed him from the Raiders, and he was okay, but he didn't get the job done in a very weak division. And then now everybody in their division improved, and they're going down. The only thing that's going to save them is that they have tied for the easiest strength of schedule. And so their win total is probably going to be too high for them to flirt with the number 1 pick.
Right.
So they're in an interesting spot, but it's hard to project them to be any kind of sleeper or dark horse in the NFC.
Absolutely.
And then the Raiders, their roster is too talented to be this low, but it's just this is a quarterback situation thing where, you didn't really upgrade. You invested in Gardner Minshew, and it would have been fine if you did that with the bridge of bringing in somebody, and then they didn't do that. So it's tough. And then also, you just wonder with Antonio Pierce, they had a really strong end of the year, late November, December, with him when he took over. But you wonder if that's lighting in the bottle or if that is something that's sustainable, because we've seen it feels like the Raiders get better when they have a midseason coach firing, like
Yeah,
every
they
time.
do.
And it's happened very often recently. So, that's just kind of one of those situations where you just wonder, can you build on an 8-9 year where you probably overachieved?
Hmm.
You're probably a 6-win team, but you can be better as a 6-11 than an 8-9. Usually you wouldn't be like, oh, you got worse, but you can show strides
Hmm.
despite taking a slight step back in record. And that's kind of how I view it right now, just because the division and the conference is just so strong.
Yeah, the AFC is very good, and we're gonna have to. We have one of the harder schedules on the board. But we did, like you said, we added some really good football players, and of course, we lose guys like Josh Jacobs. But I feel like we have the capabilities of replacing that production.
The positive thing is you're probably one of the few teams that has a top 10 offensive line and top 10 front seven.
Yeah.
So not many are good at both. And when you're good in the trenches on both sides of the ball, that's what kind of helped you outperform expectations. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing that you can hang your hat on for the Raiders. But, it's the quarterback situation why they're this low.
Right. Absolutely. And then next up, we got the Minnesota Vikings. They're probably just a year removed is how it feels.
Yep.
Adding JJ McCarthy, he probably will not start this year. They have Sam Darnold that they added in free agency. They added some solid edge rushers, good running back. They're trying, right? But at the same time, they also lose some really good edge rushers. Their quarterback, their couple wide receivers. So that's the other problem. So it goes both ways here in this picks.
Yeah, I think the NFC North is suddenly becoming. I don't know if it's there yet, but it's becoming the toughest division in football. And Detroit is a front runner, believe it or not, to go to the Super Bowl this year. They have our favorite roster in the entire NFL. Green Bay, massive finish to the year. A lot of really young roster, one of the youngest playoff teams in years.
Mm-hmm.
You would expect them to at least maintain, if not improve off that. And then Chicago was a 7-win team that added one of the best quarterback prospects in years, and then massively improved their roster this offseason. Minnesota, probably they did improve their roster, but it wasn't at the pace of the other teams. And then also because of the quarterback situation, they're probably going to be a fourth place team in their division. And I just don't see them, having an improvement from their 7-10 record that they did last year.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now we've got the Seattle Seahawks. They are going to be a team that we believe is going down. They just kind of felt stagnant, but then also didn't re-sign any of their defensive players. Everybody on defense, I feel like, is gone, and then didn't add necessarily guys that are ready to help them out now in those spots.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the biggest issue I see with this whole thing.
It's a more talented version of New England.
Yeah.
Whereas New England, again, first time in a long time, brand new coaching staff, and then made a lot of lateral movements. Whereas Seattle, Pete Carroll's the third longest tenured coach, is gone now. And, you lost a lot of quality vets on your roster, and you didn't really bring in a ton of guys that are going to replace that level of talent. So I said earlier, Arizona, I expect them to make a leap, even though right now they're probably deserve to be this low. And Seattle's the team that really should be looking in the rearview mirror, because they could really fall to the bottom of this division fast.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I just don't see them maintaining, at least in the first year in this new regime.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's absolutely true. I mean, it's a weird situation in Seattle to me. And I think that they did not do enough to get better. Mm-hmm. So, and then we look at the Colts, who I think had the best 2 picks of the in the draft for a team almost overall, because they get really good value in Adonai Mitchell, and then Leatu Latu was our number 1 edge off our board. They needed that type of help. Didn't lose a ton. Gardner Minshew, of course, was one of the best backup quarterbacks this last year, but they didn't lose a ton overall. And then they add a backup quarterback in Joe Flacco, who had a resurgence, which I don't believe will happen again. But if he has to go in, okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, like you said, the departures, additions, very minuscule. They invested a lot in re-signing and extending their guys because they have a lot of good young talent on the defensive side of the ball, and that's what they really spent their money on. And you really only lost a backup quarterback, former first round bust, a defensive tackle, and then a backup running back.
Yep.
And so this year you're regaining your recent top 5 pick. You're regaining a former All-Pro running back, and then you still got DeForest. No, I'm sorry. You just got a lot of good young talent.
Right.
So it's very tough to place them. They're one of the hardest teams to place, and even when I, shot you a draft of, teams, and I'm like, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Who's too high and too low? You were like, Colts feel too low.
Yeah.
And to me, completely agree. But it's just hard to play. They're so hard to place right now. And there's teams that I can almost guarantee they're going to finish better than this. And they will all season be in the top 20 where they're not right now. But it's just, as of right now, everybody's healthy. So we got to project based on roster and where we see it. And even though Anthony Richardson was really good for a month,
yeah,
he's got 4 games of action and then a really underwhelming college career that we're just gambling on physical tools. It looks like it's there, but we've seen time and time again, something looks like it's there and then just never really develops.
Well, I will say, like Trey Lance, injury, first couple of years and just doesn't play. And now we
still don't know.
Yeah. And he could have been good. At this point,
he is probably an afterthought, but you just don't know. He had basically 3 starts before they were like, no, we're going to the Mr. Irrelevant. And it seems unfair, but obviously behind the scenes, he didn't do enough.
Yeah.
And then with Anthony Richardson, he's behind the scenes. It sounds like it's going great, but it's not like we saw enough to where we're like, oh yeah, they're going to build on this 9-8 and they're just going to be a threat to the win of this division. I think there's a gap between Jacksonville, Houston, and then Indianapolis, which may be a difference of opinion with the public, but that's just kind of how I view it right now.
Right. And then we will jump into the top 20. And then we have the Los Angeles Chargers. They got better based on coaching staff. Let's just be honest. Like that changed everything for them, because we watched a defensive coordinator who's their head coach underperform on defense and be lower than 25 in every year he's there. And now they go and get Jim Harbaugh and they add a lot of other assistant coaches to this team. They lost. Truly, at the end of the day, you look at departures versus additions. Well, they lost. Departures were better than the additions, but the team is going to be better. And they will win more because of what's going on situationally as a coaching staff.
Their success on this season is not going to make sense on paper.
No.
It won't. People were out of their mind, or thought they were out of their minds for passing on a receiver for taking Joe Alt. And it's like, that is the correct decision.
Yeah.
Collectively, taking Neighbors and insert second round tackle here is a much worse combination than Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey.
Absolutely.
So, and then on top of that, Junior Colson, which was one of our favorite in our favorites picks video. If you wanted to check that out, yeah, it's not going to look great. Receivers are it's a jumbled mess. It's not going to feel good drafting any of them from a fantasy perspective, but they're going to be a really good team. But the thing is, with Jim Harbaugh, it feels like every time he's taken over something, it took a year for him to finally hit stride.
Right.
Like, he went to Michigan and they were in the bottom of the Big Ten for years. And then, I think they were 6-10 or 6-6 or 7-5. right?
Something like that. Yeah.
And then he was blown out against Ohio State. But then look at how he finishes. Look at with San Francisco, rocky start. Had them in the Super Bowl with the game on the line to win it. Stanford, everywhere he's gone, he's left it better, and he finished strong. It wasn't a falling out why he departed. He basically upgraded his situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if it's too early to put them as a top 7 team in the AFC, but I know they're capable of it because of the coaching staff, what they have.
Right. And they have, I know that everybody, the wide receiver core is down, but Mike Williams didn't play very much last year. And so basically you lose Keenan Allen, you replace him with Ladd McConkey, and you have a more balanced receiving core across the board. You're going to get a much better run game, and your defense is going to be more stout. It sounds on paper, yes, like you said, the names don't matter at this situation because they're going to use them so much better than they were used prior.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of our favorite draft classes, top to bottom. It wasn't even just the top first 3. Kamani Vidal fits exactly what they want to do. Brandon Rice, steal in the 7th round. Just, they did a really good job in that draft. They got their guys, their kinds of guys. Denzel Perryman's going to be the tackler type of guy. You get Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They're just going to take the Baltimore running game, and they're just going to do the things that they want to do much better than whatever was happening last year.
Right.
So, and then moving up, you got Tampa Bay making it in the top 20. They won the first round, the wild card round last year, way overperformed. But they still got a really easy strength of schedule at the end of the day. Helped improve their offense in the draft a little bit. I thought they had an underrated draft. I think that Graham Barton was an awesome pick at 26. And then some additions, they're going to have a good defense, even knowing their front 7 is a little rough right now.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, despite being 9-8 and then blowing out Philadelphia, the reigning NFC champions, you would have thought that they would get more respect than they have right now. But their 7.5 win total is, outside the playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are picking heavy minus money for Atlanta to win the division, despite the poor draft they had, and we'll talk about them in a moment. Tampa, they lost some pieces, but they re-signed Antoine Winfield, one of the top 5 safeties in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually pleasantly surprised to see Mike Evans return there.
Mm-hmm.
We figured that Baker would get an extension. It's probably better for him that Mike Evans is back.
Oh, yeah.
In the first round, we always had them trading out, but Graham Barton fell in their lap, and it's a great signing. Their line kind of fell off due to age and retirements and what have you, and he's going to step in and make a difference early on. Chris Braswell fell to them in the 57th pick. We thought he was a early to mid round, 2nd round edge. That's fine, and it's tough to place again. But I think they're clear cut the second or a top 2 team in the NFC South. And if they did win the division once again, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah,
they're going to be in the 8 to 10 win range in my eyes, just based on schedule. And I just think they're going to perform better.
And we'll talk about Atlanta in a second, but I definitely could see them underperforming.
Exactly.
New coach, not sure what's going to happen at the quarterback position, things like that. Moving over to the worst strength of schedule, for the Cleveland Browns. I actually think I asked, Cleveland's a little low. And then you were like, well, they have the hardest strength of schedule, and they're having to deal with a lot of things that, very Cleveland-esque feel to this season, I guess is how it kind of comes out to.
A lot of the one word that can describe them is 2-letter word, if.
Fair enough.
Deshaun Watson, if he comes back and regains his form from 4 years ago, if Nick Chubb on his second major injury come back, can he be the same?
Yeah.
If Amari Cooper can stay healthy, because he finally had a healthy season, but he's past 30. If their offensive line can stay in the top 5 that they've been for the last half decade.
Yeah.
If their defense can be number 1, even though, getting 31 dropped on you by a rookie quarterback
Yeah.
They scored 45, but 31 offensive points. And then in their draft, again, didn't have a first round pick. The final trade piece of the Deshaun Watson trade doesn't wow us. We talked about Love and Zach Center,
Yeah,
but
they
again,
got good value in the
they got good
draft,
value,
but
but it's not stuff that's just like, oh wow, that's impressive. Jameis Winston coming in replacement of Joe Flacco.
mhm.
You want to say that's an upgrade, but Jameis Winston has just kind of fallen out of favor with us just because he just can't figure it out.
Oh, I love
And
Jameis Winston's arm. I just hate his
so
mind.
exactly. So yeah, I just don't know how to place them right now. And then on top of that, um, you're going to have better situations. So Pittsburgh, even though Pittsburgh and Cincinnati dealt with injuries and they
Mhm.
finished behind them, I see Cleveland as the fourth best team in this division, and it's hard to put
Right.
them even close to a top 10 possibility right now, just even based off last year.
Well, I think the other two teams, we talk about improvements. Well, quarterback is an
Mhm.
improvement. You know what I mean?
I think one of the easiest bets you can make in terms of win props is under 8.5 for Cleveland. I don't think that there is much of a chance that they can finish with a winning record. I think overall roster is now fourth best, or
Mhm.
maybe third best, but Cincinnati has a quarterback to put him over the top.
Right.
Um, there's no way that all four teams are finishing with a winning record, and I just don't have a lot of optimism that all those ifs that we talked about can
Well,
actually turn out for them.
Jerry Judy's also an F you didn't mention.
Yeah.
And because we don't know if he can do it. He didn't do it prior. So, yeah, there's a ton of stuff there. And then, moving up to Jacksonville, I think that, Jacksonville is kind of a hard team to place also. I don't know that I thought they got better, but I think they're a neutral team in my eyes. I don't think they got better or worse. I thought they kind of just got players
The deal is last year they finish worse than they actually are.
right.
And so they're not going to be, because of the way Houston finished, the public is all in on Houston, especially the offseason that they had because they won the offseason
Mm-hmm.
to us.
Oh, I'm in on Houston.
So, but the thing is with Jacksonville, they were 8-3,
Mm-hmm.
and then injuries started happening, and Trevor Lawrence started getting kicked around and rolled up on, and he had a shoulder, he had an ankle, he had a concussion. Like he dealt with it all, and on top of having a down year to begin with, he wasn't playing well. Again, kind of lateral. Eric Armstead is a very, very good signing for them. I don't make too much about any of their losses. K'Lavon Chaisson did not pan out as a first rounder. Trey Herndon, okay. Calvin Ridley, you would have had to overpay to keep him.
Yeah, and he needed a number one receiver
exactly
to be good.
So, and then one of our favorite draft moves was moving back, getting 2 mid-round picks next year, and then still landing Brian Thomas.
Yeah.
So obviously they don't have the 1,500-yard receiver, but the trio of Brian Thomas and Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, completely fine with that.
Evan Ingram.
Evan Ingram was tight end 2 in terms of fantasy last year. Travis Etienne was running back 3.
Mm-hmm.
They've got weapons all around. Their defense is scrappy.
Mm.
They were able to keep Josh Allen.
Huge.
So they're a 10-win team to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think the public is really on that right now. Their win total is same as Cleveland, 8.5, and it's even money. So there's no lean.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see them with the losing record unless, they just kind of completely fall out of favor and Trevor Lawrence doesn't go back to what we think he can be, which I just don't see. He's too talented to just continue the struggling start that he had. And he didn't go to a good situation to begin with. Urban Meyer was just like a joke. It was a joke.
It is.
And that's what he inherited.
Yeah.
And, Doug Marrone goes over there and they have a huge turnaround, win a playoff game, one of the biggest comebacks in playoff history. And then last year was right in the thick of the 1 seed.
Mm-hmm.
And then just it goes to shit. And similar to Philly, but we're going to have Philly much higher.
Right.
Because of just the
talent.
on paper talent that they have. Yeah. But Jacksonville winning the division is not going to shock me. Probably won't be our pick, but I just don't want to completely vault Houston into Super Bowl contender yet.
Right. Absolutely.
Because again, their win total last year was 4.5. And while I was like, that's the easiest bet over, I didn't predict what they finished with.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
No one
did. No,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, so like we mentioned, Atlanta, they're the lowest of all the top ranked in their division
Yeah.
teams. It's just a projection based team. They're 3 straight seasons of 7-10, but they have the easiest strength of schedule. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is an upgrade over Desmond Ridder, but you don't know with his. But the thing is, again, 3 straight 7-win seasons, and the juice is on them at over 9.5. 9.5 is one of the 5, I believe, highest win totals in the NFC, and minus 148 to go over.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard to not project that.
Well, I think that the thing is they could easily underperform. Like very easily underperform. What is underperforming for them? Probably 8 wins and maybe 9, and they still could go to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, like you should probably mark them in as a playoff team. I don't know that I would touch the over or the under on the line though. I think that they are a playoff team though.
Yeah, so. I mean, it by default, based on the division that they're in the weakest division, easiest schedule, and then the easier conference where you're going to have one team with a losing record, and it could very well be them.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's tough to project. And then Jets, top 10 roster in football.
Yeah,
they just quarterback is the issue, and we're gonna say, oh, Aaron Rodgers is back. I don't view him as a top 5 quarterback anymore. I don't even know if he's a top 10 quarterback anymore. But they've got all the potential in spite of him to still be a winning record team. And so that's saying something. If Zach Wilson was their starter this year, I would feel pretty solid about a 9-win team just because they can win in spite of that. Right. And then they improved, at least in the short term, with a lot of issues that they had. Offensive line was second worst in football last year, and they heavily addressed it. 3 starting offensive linemen, and then they drafted the second best left tackle in the class. So did really well, at least in the short term. Hassan Reddick was traded.
Javon Kinlaw, who's
former first-round pick. Yeah. Mike Williams, obviously, I don't expect him to regain in the 1,000-yard form anymore after his ACL injury, but he's doesn't have to be the target hog.
Right.
There's so much around that offense, and so yeah, I mean, they're to me a dark horse to win that division. The juice is on them to finish above 10 wins, and I feel a lot better about them doing that than somebody like Buffalo, which we'll talk about. But I just think the gap has closed so much, and really we had that entire division outside New England just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah. Let's just jump over to the next team in that division in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, truly, I asked you this because it was, there's 3 in a row. We'll just be honest. The next team's Miami. And I was like, do you think Miami's the best team in that division? And because I was like, and then, it's just the question of like, because they're so close. They're all so close. Miami and Buffalo go down.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets go up just by getting a quarterback. It's like Buffalo had serious cap issues, hard strength of schedule. And then if you look at the additions on the board, they got 3. And then their departures is just everybody.
Yeah, formatting
all their players.
Formatting wise, there's a space in between every category, and we had to delete a space so we could fit all the departures that they have.
Yeah,
and I mean they're losing more starters, contributors than any other team, any other playoff team, including somebody like Dallas, who they just didn't replace.
Yeah.
Whereas Buffalo, they actually re-signed some guys. It could have been bigger. They re-signed about 3 or 4 guys, and then they bring in, Mike Edwards, who's been a fine safety. La'el Collins is now on his 3rd team in 3 years, so no longer what he once was.
Right.
Mr. Trubisky
backup
is literally Josh Allen, but worse.
Yeah.
But so fine backup. And then your top 2 receivers are gone, and
your whole secondary is gone.
Your defensive line depth or your edge depth, they went 6-7 deep.
Mhm.
If you remember after the season opener after the Rams won the Super Bowl, and the Rams got absolutely run out the building by Buffalo, and then everybody's like, "Oh, Buffalo's
Yeah.
they're the team to beat," and it's just like they kind of do it to themselves. They've just been the
Right.
second best team for 4 straight years in the AFC, pretty much. And really, this is Sean McDermott's last shot,
Mhm.
and it just feels like the window has officially closed, but yet the public still has them at 10.5 wins. But it's hard to see them being. I feel like they're one of the easiest teams to be as a candidate to miss the playoffs
Mhm.
this year in the AFC.
Yeah.
Just because of the path that they have to go and the presumable. I guess Miami actually surprisingly got better this offseason. With all the departures we thought that they were facing, actually was fine. And then with the Jets, obviously they're improving just by having Aaron Rodgers back in the building.
Yeah. And actually, I misspoke. We had moved Miami up a little bit.
Yeah,
That's my fault. At first we had talked about them
they were
being
bam,
right.
bam, bam.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we had to move up Miami, especially they made some more moves in recently. But yeah, we'll jump off the board. Chicago is probably going to be way higher on our power ranking than any other power ranking you're going to see right now.
It'll change.
They're a playoff team.
Yeah.
They're a top 17 in the NFC. Get over it. One of the easiest strengths of the schedules. And they were a 7-win team last year, despite having the number 1 pick. And then, they just made so many moves to improve their roster. It's hard to not see them at 10 wins. Again, one of the easiest bets. Well, at this point, the juice is so high on it, minus 150 to go over 8.5. Probably it's a better bet if you just say make the playoffs because they're plus money to make the playoffs right now, despite that,
Yeah,
which is surprising. But yeah, we love Chicago, and I would not be shocked if they finish second in that division over Green Bay.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had I was like, Green Bay's a little high. We'll talk about them in a minute. But yeah, even for that. So I think that this team got a lot better. And, they gave Caleb Williams first overall pick, 3 receivers, a good tight end, a group of running backs. I don't think that DeAndre Swift is going to be the only running back that's going to really touch the ball. And then defensively, they re-signed Jalen Johnson. They brought in Montez Sweat. They've got pieces to do some really good things. So I think that this team is ready to make the playoffs, even surprise teams, because they're going to be electric. They're going to be able to outscore teams, if that makes sense. And in the playoffs, sometimes, of course, it gets cold and stuff like that, but you want teams that can outscore. Like if you're a coach, you're trying to get the team that can outscore, not necessarily the team that can stop the team that can score a lot of points. You know what I mean?
Right.
At that point in the year.
So my thing is Houston finishes 10 wins the division out of nowhere, right? Wins a playoff game, and then now they're contenders.
Right.
There is no reason Chicago, despite being much better than Houston was at the time in public eye, there's no reason they shouldn't be the exact same path of being a Final Four team in the NFC. I'm not putting them over Detroit in the division, but going to the playoffs and winning, that is a win. And to me, missing the playoffs is actually a disservice because there's so much going right for them right now that it's hard to not see the leap. This isn't just a leap of faith like, oh, I'm anticipating this. Like, it is there, it's happening. I just don't get people that have them ranked 25th in the NFL. This is not even close to a bottom 6-7 team.
Absolutely not.
Like, they were the 9th worst team last year. That was with Justin Fields and Tyler Badgett. They have Caleb Williams now and Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze.
Yeah.
And all these guys that they brought in, like, they're a top 6-7 team for sure in the NFC. And they had the schedule to also replicate that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And originally we had them over Dallas. But I just couldn't make that leap yet.
Yeah.
I don't see Dallas winning the division. And they did lose a lot. and it just, again, they got worse this year.
Mhm.
Every other playoff team
Every
got
team
better,
in your division.
other than, I guess, New York.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, everybody else got better, and Dallas, they're all in, but just kind of stay lateral. And
It's
I just see
ridiculous.
them as a frustrating 9 and 10 win team that is probably an early out. And it's like, I just forecast this being a last ride, so to speak, of being not a Super Bowl contender, but a top 5 team in the conference.
Well, I mean, if I just think about this, I read off the departures: Tyler Smith, Stephon Gilmore, Leighton Vander Esch, Tony Pollard, Tyler Vidoc, Jaron Curse, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Jonathan Hankins. Like, those are all legit players. Like, everybody I just said, those are good football players. You add Eric Kendricks, who's on his last legs, and then you re-sign Zeke.
We liked it for the price.
I love the price,
but
that's
it's
it.
like
There's nothing else.
Your retread running back 1A, I guess you can call him now by default,
Yeah.
doesn't replicate the losses that you had in the other,
Oh, no.
10 players that you just rolled off. And then their draft, we don't hate it, but it's projects.
Yeah.
It's Tyler Guyton, sure, never played left tackle in his life. We had our friend Steiger asked for our opinion on, Dallas being the second most improved offensive line. No, they got worse on the offensive line.
Oh, yeah. Losing Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz. Come on,
Pro Bowlers. And then you're expecting Tyler Guyton, who's never played left tackle. Oh, step in, be left tackle. And then Tyler Biadasz wasn't a Pro Bowler this year, but was in 2022. You're expecting Cooper Beebe, who we like.
Oh, yeah, I love him.
Who's never played center. Go be center.
Yeah, he's played a little bit of center, but he literally played every position on the O-line.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not, he's ready to play now. He's probably truly more ready than Tyler Guyton.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to just change everything. Yeah, it's a little puzzling. I will say this is a team that's going backwards, and I don't think that they will be in the top 15 when we get to like preseason, in my eyes.
I don't see they'll be right in the middle of the pack to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they'll just kind of it'll just see how the run goes. I just think they're too good to be bottom dwellers,
mm-hmm.
but they're not good enough to be a top 5 team in the conference anymore.
No.
But really, when we do playoff predictions and stuff, they're going to be in the mix for the final 2 spots. Mm-hmm. We just need to see how the schedule shakes out, and then what else happens, because there are still a lot of good names on the market.
Right.
So if these young teams that add a ton of guys, I don't anticipate Dallas doing that.
June 1st is the cut. So when June 1st hits, that's of players,
when money opens up.
James Bradbury, those types of guys are going to be cut. I don't know that Dallas needs that guy, but you know what I mean? Like, good players are going to be cut, and we'll see. But they just didn't do it yet, to say the least. A team that did a really good job of fixing their O-line is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
They, to me, had an amazing draft, and then also, get 2 quarterbacks that are running quarterbacks to even help their O-line more in a different way. Add Patrick Queen, add Peyton Wilson, who was a steal in the draft to us. Just really did a good job this offseason.
Our favorite draft. My favorite draft.
I don't know that it's my favorite, but yes, I completely agree that it's a top 5.
To me, it's a great class if you get 3 starters out of your 7 to 8 picks that you have annually. And I feel like they have 5 guys that can start right away.
Yeah.
And then Ryan Watts is a really good defensive back that can be a good depth piece. So, but then, like you said, quarterback situation has improved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how soon Justin Fields will take over, but I guarantee you they're going to give him a look.
Right.
I don't anticipate, because they declined his option. So basically, free agent, you're going to either have to tag somebody that hasn't played for you, or you're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
And either way, Russell Wilson, despite him getting released and largest cap hit ever, he still did fine last year. He was serviceable. And then couple that with good coaching, and then they're got a new scheme where it's not quarterback, I guess, prioritized.
Right.
With Arthur Smith coming in. So It's a thing that I just think Pittsburgh is back to, not back yet,
Right.
because championships is their DNA. But they're in the thick of,
Right
they're a playoff
direction.
team.
For
They're not.
sure.
They're no longer surprised to make the playoffs, despite they're probably a little underrated in the public eyes, just
Mhm.
because I don't think people are putting them as a top 7 right now, because there's just so much
Right.
depth
Absolutely.
everywhere. But yeah.
Well, top 10. Here we go. Miami Dolphins.
Mhm.
That's all. We just talked about them a lot. Good. The things that they did, they basically found a way to get guys on their defense that were on much cheaper contracts, but were veterans. They're not going to be there for a long time, but they're going to be able to hold down the fort.
They're patching up the holes that
Yeah,
we thought that they were just going to have
Yeah.
in their roster.
because their offense is fine, ready to go.
Christian Wilkins, let's be honest, it was a mistake that they didn't tag him.
Oh man, thank you.
But other than that, like all the other departures that they had, they
Mhm.
actually got somewhat of an upgrade.
Right.
You know, you kind of compare Xavier Howard versus Kendall Fuller. Kendall Fuller was playing better. Jordan
Mhm.
Poyer versus Deshaun Elliott. Jordan Poyer is a former Pro Bowler. Jordan Brooks is a top 10 linebacker, and he's replacing Jerome Baker and Andrew Van Ginkel. I mean, Shaq Barrett has been a Super Bowl winning edge rusher.
Mhm.
Aaron Brewer is a very good center. Johnny Smith doesn't matter because they don't use tight ends, but he stole touches from Bijan
Yeah.
on the goal line. So he's at least a talented football player. And then OBJ, at this point, don't expect much. But when you have to worry about Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill over the top,
Right.
and then scat backs having 20+ mile an hour speed, now you have 3 of them. So then you leave OBJ in the middle to run intermediate stuff, and
OBJ is like the 7th, 8th option on this team right now, which is just
that's incredible.
Yeah, and that's perfect. Malik Washington, he's the slot receiver we really liked and thought that this is probably a steal. He's gonna, because they have outside receivers.
Mhm.
OBJ's an outside receiver. Malik Washington can go and help them in the inside too. It's just they have all the talent offensively. Jalen Wright added to a really, a bunch of 4.3-years in their backfield, and so now they just have all this talent. I'm not sure how they're going to use it yet, but it's
always obviously you're not playing for next year, but small positives you can take away. It actually did them a favor that they didn't win the division last year, because you saw Buffalo top 6 hardest schedule. Miami's in the top 10 easiest schedules.
Right.
And it's all because of the 3 opponents that they have to play, because they were a second place team, not a first place team. So it's going to help a lot. And I think they should be a favorite in the division. I think right now they're basically a pick 'em between them and Buffalo, and I don't see it as that way anymore, just because they surprisingly stayed lateral. I didn't expect them to stay lateral this offseason. I expected them to get worse, and they did not. So that's why they got to be here. We did move Green Day down a little bit, but being at 9 was a bit of a surprise. To me, it's just all about, was that lightning in the bottle, or was that actually what they're becoming?
Well, I think we're kind of over exaggerating how good Jordan Love is.
Yes.
Let's be very honest. Like Jordan Love, he's not a bad quarterback, but can we really say he's a top 8 quarterback? No way.
For 10 weeks, he was Desmond Ridder.
And then all of a sudden,
he's Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly.
Like it was a big switch, and incredible shout out to him.
Yeah,
he
props.
made himself a lot of money, but that doesn't guarantee all of a sudden, he's solidified. He's stamped himself as top 5 in the conference. But they have a lot of young talent.
Yeah. It has a lot to do also with like you said, the young talent. Like they have 4 or 5 receivers that are under the age of 25 that are really solid.
Right.
And we love Xavier McKinney. Adding him, they get Josh Jacobs. That's a much better running back situation, especially now that they have Marshawn Lloyd as a backup and fit. Andre Dillard, whatever. Add depth. Jordan Morgan going to left tackle for David Bakhtiari. It's just,
which he wasn't a factor last year. He missed essentially the whole season.
Right.
So it's a name loss. It's not really a
right. He didn't replace him.
Production loss.
Correct.
But I mean, like you said, you upgraded everywhere. Xavier McKinney over Donovan Savage, by far an upgrade. Josh Jacobs at this point over Aaron Jones, upgrade. I'm sorry, Gary. Jordan Morgan over just random swing tackle, upgrade. Edgerrin Cooper over Devondre Campbell, upgrade. Javon Bullard, we liked. Marshawn Lloyd was one of the few running backs in this weaker class that actually went to a solid compliment. And we'll talk about him as like a handcuff / late round best ball selection all summer. So they did get better. And the only thing is, you look at the strength of schedule, and it's going to be predicated on how tough it is, because Chicago's got the 4th easiest. Green Bay's got the 4th hardest.
Well, my other thing is we have to be able to trust Jordan Love. And I don't know that I can yet. And that's my problem. It's not so much the schedule's whatever, everything else. They got better as a team. Can he be the quarterback that he was for the last 5 weeks of the season? And I don't know that I think he can. And that's my biggest take.
For sure.
And that's why I said maybe they're too high, because truly there's some better quarterbacks in my eyes that are behind him.
I told you when I was making this like a rough draft of our first power rankings, and I was like 8 to 15 is so hard because it's projection at this point a lot. And we'll talk about Cincinnati now. Like they missed the playoffs 9-8, largely because Joe Burrow just the entire season was hampered. I mean, he went down on a non-contact rollout, and that basically screwed him up for 5 weeks. And then he started to hit his stride, and he had a wrist thing, and then non-contact just tears his wrist on a touchdown. And then they still were 9-8 in competitive. My only thing is just it's so their depth is not what it was in their Super Bowl run. And their draft class was okay. But I mean, running back wise, downgrade. Zach Moss to Joe Mixon, DJ Reader to Sheldon Rankins, downgrade. Tight end wise, they're recycling just retread tight ends every year, it seems. Mike Gesicki, okay. That's really their only additions. Jonah Williams left, but okay. Not a huge deal. Chidobe Awuzie was actually a big loss in my eyes, especially they didn't really replace him until Josh Newton. And then Tyler Boyd, can't forget about him. And then T. Higgins, while right now we would predict that he would stay there, the trade request hasn't been revoked per se. But yeah, this team goes as Joe Burrow goes, and probably 8 feels too high, but it's just there's there's 2 quarterbacks in the entire Patrick Mahomes era that have taken them down in the postseason. That's Tom Brady, who's no longer in the NFL, and Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and we just talked about Green Bay. It's predicated on how good their quarterback is. Well, it's the same way here. Green Bay has the better team overall.
Way better.
But the quarterback situation, I'm way more comfortable if Joe Burrow plays 17 games, that they are going to be a better team and more wins.
Right.
And that's just how you have to look at it sometimes. And they, Cincinnati's a hard team to predict for me, because I don't know. They have good receivers. They've a solid O-line. They got 2 tackles that improved and a third tackle that is a project a little bit. And we thought he should have gone somewhere different, but I know that PFF loves him there because of the fact that, it's just Joe Burrow's been hurt so much. I don't know.
And the one thing I also will point out, strength of schedule is not end all be all, but it is a huge factor, especially on teams when you view as unknowns. Every other team in that division, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore, 1, 2, 3 in terms of hardest schedules in the NFL. They're in the middle of the pack at 16.
Yeah.
So significantly less competition that they have to face, which also will help keep them in the thick of things, because I would not put a safe bet on who would win that division, because I think really all 4 are capable of it. But, it just kind of depends. I think Cincinnati has the worst roster in the division, but they, to me, have the safest, if he's on the field, quarterback to predict. And that's over a 2-time MVP, and that's saying something.
Yeah. So. Then moving up to the Rams, they, of course, unfortunately, they just have to get worse. It is what it is. Like when you retire one of the best, possibly the best defense player of all time, like you get worse a little bit. But I don't think they did a bad job, kind of grabbing players to help improve their defense, and then also their interior offensive line. Jonah Jackson, huge pickup in my eyes.
And re-signing Kevin Dotson as well.
Yeah.
That wasn't expected. So,
and then
a lot of the free agent signings were kind of overpays to me. I like the Cameron Curl signing, but their defense was supposed to be one of the worst in football last year, and they were very, very good. And so they got better, and then you look at their draft selections, and then 5 of their first 7 picks were hammering defensive line. So, yeah, in one person, they're not going to even come close to making up the production of Aaron Donald, but you can try by just having an entire overhaul of it. I like their roster a lot. One of the best well-coached teams in football, and it just sucked that Detroit had to play the Rams, because I thought both of these teams were top 4 teams in the conference last year, or we'll say top 5,
right?
And they just had to face each other.
Early.
I think either of these teams would have ran the Tampa Bay or Philly out of the stadium.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it just came down to matchup. Problem with the Rams, they're in the same division as San Fran, so can they overtake that? I don't know. We'll just kind of see what happens, but they're just a safe team to me.
Yeah, they'll be a playoff team for sure. I also like the bringing back Darius Williams, ex-Ram.
Yep.
And then Tre'Davious White, that is a hope pay, but hey, if he's healthy,
he was a top 5 corner.
Oh yeah,
his Achilles and his ACL.
I hope he's healthy. That's exactly what we want, and they did a pretty good job top to bottom, I think. So, they didn't add an extra quarterback. I think they could have done that. But moving up, you got Houston. It's probably kind of where everybody else sees them. They added so many players during the offseason. They had a pretty young, rough secondary last year. That was the biggest issue that they had. Well, they added everybody they could to their secondary, including, they just kept going for old first rounders that didn't pan out, adding Jeff Okudah, CJ Henderson, adding to their offense Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, and then Danielle Hunter, and is one of the best, if not, he's a top 5 edge rusher in my eyes. So it's just, they did a really good job.
Solskjaer is a really underrated linebacker.
Yes,
and then last year, the reason they had such success, and I told you I liked their moves last year, because they just signed a ton of vets on 1-year deals. That's really what helped bring their run game, which was 3 straight years bottom of the NFL, to all of a sudden they're top 5. It was crazy turnaround. Derrick Henry, 200 yards a game against them, and then just completely stifled.
Yeah.
So, and thankfully they don't even have to worry about him anymore. So, at least in the division. So, yeah, they won the free agency period, and then the draft, they made a surprising move of just gaining 2 seconds when Minnesota swapped and tried to get a second one to leverage up, presumably to move into the top 5. They never did that, but that was their plan. Houston moved back, got a second first next year, and then essentially flipped that for Stephon Diggs, who still is a top 10 receiver in the short term. It was a little pricey based on the fact that they just wiped his contract, so it's a 1-year rental essentially. But they're deep in a lot of places all of a sudden. And it's just like, they're the epitome of why the NFL is so great. The parity that can exist. You can be a bottom 5 team, and then all it takes is 1 to 2 draft classes, and you're just right there again.
I think Stephon Diggs was a luxury trade, and that's the big thing.
I know they definitely did not need it.
No, but they wanted to get a number 1 to ensure that they had somebody better than Nico Collins. I mean, we can say that. Nico Collins looked great last year, but prior to CJ Stroud being there, he wasn't very special. And CJ Stroud made him that. Well, what happens when CJ Stroud has a true number 1 receiver? Well, okay, let's give him one. Here he is. So I think they improved drastically. And I'm on the train of the Houston, but things can happen really quickly in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so,
last year they were a 4-win team that vaulted to a 10-win team, win the division, blowing Cleveland out in the playoffs. But then this year, top 5 strength of schedule.
Yep.
And then everybody's clear cut. Oh, they're by far the best team. And again, I'm not surprised if Jacksonville turns around and wins the division. Houston's still going to be a playoff team, though. But right now, they vaulted themselves into who is most likely to help dethrone the now 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. And Baltimore can't seem to get over the hump. Buffalo's falling back. Cincinnati, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are just like, oh, Houston.
Why not?
And they very well could be now.
Yeah, they can outscore. Like, they can score. They have a better team than Kansas City overall. Easy. Kansas City just happens to have Patrick Mahomes. And so.
But yeah, going to the regular season AFC champion, Baltimore Ravens, have the number 1 seed, 2-time MVP now. Again, it's hard to place them to me because people want to place them as the number 1 contender to take out Kansas City. They had a lot of losses, and really the only thing you brought in of note is Derrick Henry, which on paper sounds great. I would never want to, in a million years, defend against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, but I don't think it makes as big of a difference as the public will perceive it.
Right.
They're still going to be a 11, 12 win team. They have the highest win total in the NFL at 11.5, tied for it. But I just don't know. I mean, they were the only team in their division that didn't have multiple quarterback injuries.
Yeah.
Last year, and that was a helpful reason of why they were still probably the best overall team in that division. But that helps you get the 1 seed when you can go 5-1 over what it should have been 6-0, were it not for a comeback from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So, but again, second hardest strength of schedule. They have the most teams that they're playing against the playoff teams. Their draft was okay. They did really good.
I like their draft, actually.
They brought in some really good corners, but then everything else, I think, is.
Well, you got. I like Adisa Isaac. I think he was a value. We like Tez Walker. I think that was too late for him, for sure. And then, if Mel Kiper's right and Roger Rosengarten is him, then we will be very happy. I guess it'll be a very big thing because he plays right tackle. He will take that spot. And if Mel Kiper's right, then that's the guy. So I don't know that I hate the draft. I think that, though, it does not make up for the amount of people that left in free agency by any means.
Not at all.
So, yeah. And then the Eagles, they did a really good job in the draft, to say the least. They had one big glaring hole, and they went and got both Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean to fix their secondary. They've got some other players. Jeremiah Trotter was one of our biggest loves based on the fall, and his dad played there and things like that. And then you look at their additions to their offense. You got Saquon. You got a backup in Kenny Pickett. And then you get Mekhi Becton if he can figure it out. Hopefully he can. And then on defense, you get a couple of other guys. You just they kind of did a good job just fixing all the retirements and guys that they're expecting to leave.
This is the definition of going all in when you are in a window.
Yeah.
It's basically solving all needs. What was their one true need was corner. They got 2 of the top 3 in the draft without having to move.
And CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah. They brought him back from Detroit after a 1-year rental. Saquon, luxury pick, but much better than Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift. So good luck with it. They extended, which I was surprised to see, both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown this offseason. Dallas Goedert is still locked up. Obviously, Jason Kelce, the heart and soul of the offensive line. We can't overlook the fact that the center is the easiest position to replace.
Right.
So they still have a top 5 line without him, which is saying something. And then Fletcher Cox, longtime veteran, future Hall of Famer, but you just drafted Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
So I think you're fine in the defensive line. And then secondary, really, they lost a couple guys, but that wasn't really helping them. Linebackers were kind of 1-year rental, or they brought in Shaq Leonard later on to try to fix it. But, I mean, it's not like it's crazy bad. The only one I don't really understand is Kenny Pickett. I don't know the reason behind trading for him.
Well, yeah, the
But
trade is weird, but you get a backup, and it's fine.
Sure,
Whatever.
I mean, the only reason he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler is because he complained about Russell Wilson being signed.
Yeah.
And so now you're for sure going to be a backup. So hopefully he's not a negative impact in the locker room
Fair.
because, whatever. But I don't expect it to be because they'll cut his ass and it'll be fine.
Whatever.
But yeah, they're one of the best rosters in football.
Good strength of schedule.
Good strength of schedule. Yeah. Detroit, our favorite roster. They just did amazing things this offseason. Again, similar to Philly, couldn't stop anybody in the secondary. So what did they do? Veteran corner, and then first 2 picks, corner.
Mm-hmm.
So
killed it.
Hopefully one of them works out at the very least. But yeah, they best offensive line in football.
Mm-hmm.
Really good skill players. Jared Goff is a very good pro. And then front 7 made massive strides this past year, and then they just added to it.
Yeah, I was surprised they didn't add like another receiver, but that was the only thing that was like surprising to me. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, they're top to bottom just stacked everywhere you look. So
yeah, and then even with the receiver, again, Jameson Williams has not panned out as a former first-round pick. But the thing is, Amon-Ra St. Brown did. Mm-hmm. And if you flip it and be like, Jameson Williams was the 4th-round pick, and Amon-Ra was the number 1 draft pick that is target hog and whatever, right. Like it works out in itself. And on top of that, that second receiver in that offense is like the 5th option. So it's very minuscule. You're nitpicking.
Right.
The only thing is now Detroit, you have expectations. You officially are in the thick of being the best team in the NFC.
Right.
So go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've never done it in your entire franchise history. So now's the time. And we have all the faith that they can.
I love Dan Campbell. So that tells you everything. But 49ers are up next. Mid strength of schedule. We didn't understand some of the stuff they did this offseason, but they're still one of the best rosters talent-wise, top to bottom, because they don't pay Brock Purdy anything to be their quarterback.
To me, it's their last hurrah.
Yeah.
I did not like their offseason at all. No. Their draft class didn't make a lot of sense. Everything seemed like a reach, at least early on. And then their additions, like they, released Eric Armstead. Chase Young, you traded a 3rd-round pick, I believe, for at the trade deadline. Didn't bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
Tashawn Gibson was very solid. And then former first-round picks, Cleveland Farrell and Javon Kinlaw, you didn't bring back. Randy Gregory's gone. Sam Darnold, so you don't have the vet anymore as your backup. You brought in Leonard Floyd. Okay, sure. And then it's not exciting. No. I think it's one of the better bets to take a step back. I don't view them as a team that is any longer a 1 seed or just the clear-cut number 1 in the NFC. But they're still in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, they still have really good coaching. And we'll just kind of see what happens. But it just feels like a missed opportunity. And then you didn't really do enough to be like, okay, no, next year's the year.
Right. Well, you look at, the strength of schedule, 12th, and then Detroit's 11th. So it's not like, I see Detroit probably being the better team. It's can they get the wins and be,
right.
Truly, because they're in a harder division. I believe they're in a harder division overall. And so that'll be just one of those more difficult things. But we'll see. Kansas City Chiefs, number 1 overall. Shouldn't be surprising, truly. Even knowing they've got some weird things going on with Rashee Rice. But they got Xavier Worthy. They got Marquise Brown. Their receiving core is better than it was last year, that's for sure.
Yep.
I thought they just did a good job staying the best team in football.
Yeah. I mean, they did fine. They didn't get worse. The biggest thing was just Chris Jones was far and away the number 1 free agent. And they paid him handsomely for good reason.
Yeah.
And then they give not Travis Kelce a contract extension, a raise, because it was just there wasn't a ton of losses that they were facing. Mike Edwards was fine, but he's been on 3-4 teams now.
Yeah.
Willie Gay was very good, but whatever. L'Jarius Sneed, they already have a future number one corner and
Yeah,
Trent McDuffie.
his replacement.
So L'Jarius Sneed, the biggest thing was we thought he would be the biggest trade candidate when he was franchise tagged. Lo and behold, it took a while, but he got traded. They still got compensation for him.
Right.
McKinnon being gone, he's over 30-year-old running back. They brought back CEH, and that's just going to be okay. But they're the best team in football, and unless Patrick Mahomes is not under center, that's not changing, at least while football's not being played.
Right. At least this year, we'll keep them at number one. But there's a couple NFC teams that are, vying to try to catch them. Mm-hmm. I don't see any AFC teams being able to knock them off the horse, though. That's how I look at it.
We'll see. This would not only has nobody ever three-peated, nobody has ever gone to 3 straight Super Bowls. So this is going to be a historical year if, like you said, they're not able to be knocked off the horse, but everybody's gunning for them, and then it's hard enough to repeat as it is. Now try three-peating. So this is going to be the first time in a long time since 2004 with the Patriots that they will see, and we'll just kind of see what happens. But that wraps up our first edition of our Power Rankings. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all those good things that make this community as fun as it has been so far, and we'll continue to do so. Tell us what you think. Who's too high, who's too low? Obviously, there's some teams that we're reaching on.
Right.
But a lot of this is just how it currently stands, because there's also some that we feel are too low, and we're just like, well, they got to earn it. So tell us all about that. What you think, what you like, what you love, what you hate. We want to hear it all.
Yep. Potential-wise, there's a lot of teams that could go up, and there's definitely some teams that we could see going down. A lot of it is predicated on quarterback, too. Mm-hmm. So we will see. We appreciate y'all being here, and we will see y'all next time.
Yep. Y'all take care.